July 1943. Kursk, the largest tank battle in history. 90 Ferdinand tank destroyers roll into the Soviet defensive lines. These are Hitler's newest wonder weapons. 70 tons of armor, an 88mm gun capable of destroying any Soviet tank at 3 kilometers, 200mm of frontal armor, virtually impenetrable. On paper, they are invincible. In reality, they have a fatal flaw. No machine gun, not a single one. Porsche engineers had designed a tank killer so focused on destroying enemy armor that they forgot something basic. Infantry. Soviet soldiers quickly figured it out. They let the Ferdinands pass. Then they crawled toward the massive machines from behind. From angles the crew could not see. From distances the 88mm gun could not depress to reach. They climbed onto the hulls. They shoved grenades into air vents. They poured gasoline into engine compartments. The crews inside had no way to fight back. They could destroy any tank in the world, but they could not kill a single man with a bottle of fuel. Within 4 days, nearly half the Ferdinands were out of action, not from Soviet tanks, from infantry, the mightiest tank destroyers in the German arsenal, crippled by men armed with glass bottles and matches. Berlin demanded a solution. What they got was perhaps the strangest weapon of the entire war, a gun that could shoot around corners, the Krummlauf. The problem. Nobody could solve. The problem extended far beyond the Ferdinand. Street fighting on the Eastern Front had exposed a fundamental vulnerability. Soviet soldiers had learned to exploit blind spots. Every armoured vehicle has them. Zones where the crew cannot see. Angles where weapons cannot aim. When a tank enters an urban environment, these blind spots become death traps. Infantry could approach from windows, from rooftops, from rubble. The crew had 2 options: open the hatches and fight, or stay buttoned up and die. Opening the hatches meant exposing yourself to snipers, to grenades, to the same close-range attacks that had destroyed the Ferdinands. Staying closed meant waiting for the inevitable. A Molotov cocktail through the engine grills, a satchel charge on the tracks. If you find this exploration of German military engineering interesting, subscribing helps the channel grow. We release new videos on the weapons that defined World War II every week. A washing machine manufacturer had an idea. The solution came from an unlikely source: Colonel Hans Joachim Scheider. Before the war, he had run a washing machine factory in Saalfeld with 500 employees. He was a successful businessman. By 1943, he worked in Albert Speer's armaments ministry. His specialty was not weapons. It was solving production problems. Scheider had noticed something. Tank crews were dying because they could not fight at close range without exposing themselves. What if the gun could bend? What if a soldier could fire around a corner without leaving cover? What if a tank crew could shoot straight down at infantry climbing their hull? The concept was not entirely new. Australian troops in World War I had mounted rifles on periscopes to fire from trenches without exposing their heads. But Scheider wanted something different, not a periscope to help you see, a barrel that would physically redirect the bullet. He took the idea to Rheinmetall Borsig. They began experimenting in autumn 1943. Bending physics. The engineers faced an immediate problem. Bullets do not like to turn. A projectile travelling at 685 meters per second has tremendous momentum. Forcing it to change direction creates enormous stress on the barrel and on the bullet itself. Early experiments with 7.92 by 57mm ammunition failed quickly. The standard rifle cartridge generated too much pressure. Barrels wore out after roughly 100 rounds. Then they tried something else. The 7.92 by 33mm Kurz cartridge, the shorter, less powerful ammunition designed for the new Sturmgewehr 44. Lower velocity, less pressure. The barrel survived longer. They settled on the Sturmgewehr 44 as the base weapon. Germany's revolutionary new assault rifle became the platform for an even more revolutionary attachment. The final design was 14 inches long, 4 inches of straight barrel, 5.5 inches of carefully engineered curve, 4.5 more inches of straight barrel at the exit. The curve was cold-formed after rifling, bent without heat to preserve the internal spiral grooves. Small vent holes drilled into the initial straight section released gas pressure as the bullet entered the curve. Without these vents, the barrel would have exploded. A periscope mirror mounted on top allowed aiming. The shooter could see where the bent barrel pointed without exposing his head. The specifications were absurd. The Krummlauf came in 2 primary versions. The I variant for infantry use bent at 30 degrees. The P variant for armoured vehicles bent at a severe 90 degrees. Right angle fire, straight down, directly onto anyone climbing your tank. Additional variants experimented with 45 and 60 degree bends, but none survived beyond prototype stage. The 30 degree version achieved something remarkable. At 100 meters, it could group shots within a 35 centimeter square, roughly the size of a man's torso. For a bullet that had just been forced around a corner, this was impressive. But the weapon had severe limitations. Expected barrel life, 6,000 rounds according to the Inventor. Actual barrel life, approximately 300 rounds for the 30 degree version, 160 rounds for the 45 degree variant. Roughly 2 to 5 minutes of sustained fire before the barrel failed completely. And the bullets themselves did not survive intact. The stress of the curve caused projectiles to shatter. Fragments exited the barrel instead of whole rounds, an unintended shotgun effect. At close range, this was actually advantageous. Multiple fragments hitting a target instead of a single bullet. But accuracy beyond 50 meters became unreliable. American ordnance officers tested the weapon after the war and found bullets consistently broke at the cannelure, the groove around the middle of the cartridge, splitting in half every time. Hitler was fascinated. The Krummlauf received Hitler's personal approval in December 1943. The Führer was obsessed with wonder weapons, jet aircraft, guided missiles, super heavy tanks, anything that promised a technological shortcut to victory. A gun that could shoot around corners captured his imagination. Plans expanded rapidly. The original concept was for tank crews only. By September 1944, orders called for 20,000 Krummlauf attachments per month for armoured vehicles. More ambitious plans aimed to equip every infantryman carrying an STG-44 with the 30 degree version. They imagined hundreds of thousands of curved barrels for street fighting, for clearing buildings, for the urban warfare that increasingly defined the Eastern Front. In November 1944, Shade received the Knight's Cross to the War Service Cross with Swords. It was Germany's recognition for outstanding contributions to the war effort, for inventing a gun that bent bullets around corners. Reality could not match ambition. Production never came close to matching the orders. Rheinmetall Borsig reported delivering 500 units of the 90 degree tank version. Zeiss manufactured approximately 1,500 optical sighting devices. The 30 degree infantry variant saw slightly higher numbers. Estimates suggest around 10,000 ordered. Fewer than 500 were actually delivered before the war ended. The Krummlauf worked. Tank crews on the Eastern Front praised it. They could finally fight off infantry attacks without opening their hatches. The weapon found its way onto Panzer IV 70 tank destroyers, mounted through roof hatches, providing close defence that previous German armour had lacked. But the limitations were severe. Short barrel life meant constant replacement. The shattering bullets reduced effective range dramatically. The complex optics added weight and fragility. And by late 1944, Germany was running out of everything. Steel, skilled workers, wonder weapons could not replace industrial capacity. When United States forces overran German weapons factories in 1945, they collected everything unusual. The Krummlauf qualified. Life magazine photographer David Sherman documented American ordnance officers examining curved barrel devices at the Walther factory in Zella-Mehlis. They thought it was a joke. Then they tested it. The official United States Ordnance Report from July 18, 1945, was surprisingly positive. The Krummlauf is an entirely new idea in controlling and changing the direction of the delivery of a bullet. It violates the old theory that a rifled barrel must be straight. It opens up a new field of research. Colonel H.A. Quinn's summary recommended further investigation. He wrote that despite the fact that the bent barrel theory violates accepted ideas on bullet delivery, it is believed to be worthy of extensive research and development. American engineers experimented with curved barrels for the M3 grease gun submachine gun. The concept was the same. Allow tank crews to engage infantry at close range without exposure. Testing continued into the 1950s. The curved barrel M3 worked, but like the German original, practical limitations outweighed theoretical advantages. The program was quietly shelved. The Soviets also took interest. They experimented with adapting the concept to the PPSH-41 submachine gun. Their results mirrored American findings. Technically feasible, practically limited. The idea refused to die. For 50 years, the concept lay dormant. Then urban warfare returned to global prominence. Counter-terrorism operations, building clearances, situations where exposing yourself around a corner could be fatal. In the early 2000s, Israeli Lieutenant Colonel Amos Golan introduced a new solution: the corner shot. Same problem the Krummlauf tried to solve. Different approach entirely. Instead of bending the bullet, Golan bent the gun. A hinged chassis holding a pistol. A video camera replacing the periscope mirror. The weapon pivots at a central hinge. The shooter stays behind cover. The pistol extends around the corner. The camera shows the target on a screen. No curved barrel, no shattering bullets, no 300-round lifespan. Today, the corner shot serves with military units and law enforcement agencies in over a dozen countries. China, Iran, India, and South Korea have all developed their own versions. 80 years after Schrader's washing machine engineering met wartime desperation, his fundamental insight proved correct. Soldiers need to fight without exposing themselves. The Krummlauf was the wrong solution to the right problem. The inventor's fate. Colonel Hans-Joachim Schrader did not celebrate victory. He was captured by Soviet forces at the war's end. They knew exactly who he was, the inventor of the bent barrel, the man who had helped tank crews kill their infantry. Soviet military courts specifically targeted him for his work. He spent 8 years in Soviet prisons, camp after camp across the vast Gulag system. In 1953, he was finally released. He returned to Germany. He lived quietly until 1967. The washing machine manufacturer who built a gun that shot around corners. The legacy of impossibility. The Krummlauf was produced in tiny numbers. It failed to change the war. It wore out after a few minutes of use. It shattered its own ammunition. It never achieved mass deployment. By every conventional measure, it was a failure, but that misses the point. The weapon represented something else entirely. The willingness to violate what engineers believed was possible. The audacity to bend physics because the alternative was death. A rifled barrel must be straight. Everyone knew this, until someone proved it did not have to be. Today, in museums across the world, surviving Krummlauf attachments draw crowds. Visitors stare at the impossible curve. They look at the weapon that should not work, but did. The gun that violated everything ballistics experts believed. The desperate invention of a losing war that pointed towards solutions still in use today. That was German engineering. Not always practical, but never afraid of the impossible.